for coming. My name is McFaul. I'm the U.S. Ambassador. Today is a pretty tragic day in American history and in U.S. diplomatic history. Our Ambassador, Chris Stevens, and 3 of his colleagues were killed today in Libya. I knew Chris, worked with him a bit in my previous job at the White House. So I'd just like to start with just a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. Appreciate that. Tonight is a unique moment in the history of American diplomacy in Russia, or the Soviet Union for that matter. I did a little poking around in anticipation of tonight, and there's never been an event like this at Spaso House. And there may never ever be an event like this ever again at Spaso House. Who knows? There's a lot of talk about innovation in Russia, as many of you know. There's a lot of innovation in our country, and there's a lot of talk about innovation in my country as well. The idea is that we'll get together, you'll all be invited all the time. We want to keep the same group of people, about this big. Well, this is almost a little too big, but about this big, and we'll meet maybe once every other month. And we want to try to create a spirit and a culture of innovative people getting together to listen to innovative people to talk about innovation. That's the idea. We're starting with literally one of the most famous, one of the most talked about innovators in my country, John Kao. Many of you know who he is. He's been here before. I see some faces who have been before. For those of you who don't know, it says right in his book and in my talking points, he's Mr. Innovator. So John, thank you very much for being here. Thanks a lot.
Ambassador McFaul, dear colleagues and friends, old and new. Thanks for that rousing introduction. I feel all kind of fired up now, and that's good because we're here really to address 3 topics. We're here to talk about innovation. We're here to look at it through a slightly unusual lens this evening, which is jazz music. A humbling thing to actually try to bring some cultural value to you along with this topic of innovation.
John, can I interrupt you?
Yes, sir.
The last person to play that piano in this room was Herbie Hancock.
Oh,
just so,
okay.
Not to put any pressure.
No. Herbie's good. I could talk about innovation in a number of different ways. I could even pull my tie tighter and give you a Harvard Business School style lecture. I could put it into a number of different frames. But about 3 years ago, I decided that it was time for me to intensify my exploration of jazz piano. It's one of those things that I kept saying, I'm going to do it when I have time. And then I realized that the time was now. It was now or never. And part of the reason for it, aside from the fact that I've loved that kind of music all my life, is that I believe that jazz musicians have a great deal to teach leaders of innovation. So I'd like to use jazz as a mechanism to give you, hopefully, a deeper sense of, or at least a sense from my own perspective of what innovation is and how it works. And to do this, I'm going to resort to the metaphor of music. How many of you play music or play some instrument of some kind? So quite a few of you, as I would expect. What do you play?
I play a little piano and I play a little trumpet.
Good for you. Okay, so that's terrific. You're a band already. So for those of you that are not musicians, I have to explain a little bit. This is sheet music. The little round black things are notes, which in the case of the piano, tells the piano player where to put their finger on the keys. If this were a piece of classical music, there would be lots of instructions. There would be, it might say something like allegro molto, which means very fast. You might have these kind of markings like tweezers that tell you to get loud and then to get soft. And then very often in classical music, you've got a little star underneath the notes, which basically tells the piano player when to put their foot on this pedal and when to take it off. So classical music is interesting because the composer was very creative. But the job of the musician, in a literal sense, is not to be creative. It's to play the notes the way they were written. Now, clearly you could play them with expression. And that's why we go to classical music concerts. We want to hear a great artist interpret a piece of music. But we don't want to hear them play 25 new notes, because that's not acceptable in the classical environment. So if I were to go to the store, let's see, I have so many microphones here. If I were to go to a store and buy the sheet music for this piece of sheet music, I have to do this for the interpreters. I'm not going to say no. This is a piece called All the Things You Are by a very famous composing pair, American, Jerome Kern and Oscar Hammerstein, who are famous composers from what was called Tin Pan Alley. So in New York, there was an area on West 28th Street where all of the music companies were. And the reason that they called it Tin Pan Alley was because there were so many cheap pianos playing songs that it sounded to one writer like a bunch of tin pans being beaten. Of course, hopefully this song doesn't sound like that, but if I went to the store and bought this as sheet music, this is what the sheet music would allow me to do. Pretty terrible, huh? Boring, a little dry, but really that's all the sheet music allows me to do. Some of you might have liked it, so I could play it again with a little different expression. So the point is that as the musician, I have no freedom. I'm basically playing the sheet music the way Jerome Kern composed it, or if it were a Bach piece, you know. Bach was a pretty good composer, but I don't have the freedom to play new notes, so I can express it differently. That's about all I can do, right? So jazz is a very different kind of music. Jazz is music that has to be, in a sense, created in the moment, and it has to sound good, or people run out of the room, they don't buy the CD, it doesn't pass any kind of commercial test. So in a literal sense, you could argue that jazz is music that both has a creative aspect to make something new, and a value creation aspect, because it has to create a sense of beauty or a sense of value for somebody. So they say, oh, that's so good, I want to go and buy the CD. So if you remember this, you know this song, many of you I'm sure are in that generation. You know. All right, so now we're going to do something different. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that there is a level of skill development that has almost nothing to do with the basic attributes, what we associate with good management. It has to do with being able to practice certain kinds of vocal skills. So the question for all of you innovation leaders in the audience is, what's your equivalent of practicing scales for 10 years that allows you to become highly skillful at the drop of a hat at the innovation process, and takes it from the realm of theory and vague ideas to the realm of specificity? How you define innovation determines what you do, what you practice, how you have the conversation. Innovation is not creativity. Creativity is, we all have it. We're all creative. We come up with new ideas. We can't help it. It's what makes us human. You know, Einstein was famous for saying, I get my best ideas in the shower. What he meant was, you're in the shower, you can't think about anything else besides taking a shower, and all of a sudden, E equals MC squared pops into your mind. It's kind of the way that we work. We daydream, we dream at night. Human beings are inherently creative. But coming up with a new idea is not the same thing as innovation. Innovation, you could say, is creativity applied to some purpose to realize value, right? So think about the jazz definition. New notes that sound good, create aesthetic experiences, lead people to buy the CDs, buy a ticket to the jazz club. Innovation also is not invention. Invention is coming up with a new discovery, as Thomas Edison did when he discovered how to do a light bulb after famously failing hundreds of times. But it wasn't until Edison became a captain of industry and had a company that sold many, 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 many light bulbs that you could safely say that he was an innovator. Because in my definition, innovation goes from the moment of inspiration all the way to the application that changes the nature of things. I mean, in a way, I'm trying to help all of us avoid word arguments, because those are kind of boring, right? We're really talking about new ideas that have the potential to be developed into something that has value, right? And also, when I started to work with countries, not companies, but countries, I realized that countries are a little bit different because they have a mission that goes beyond making money and getting executives when they do a good job. You know, countries are in the business of creating well-being for their citizens and providing for the security of their citizens, and also pursuing the human adventure, you know, going to Mars, exploring deep ocean spaces, none of which is necessarily a return on investment proposition, at least not right away, but is what societies do. So the definition that I use is that innovation is a set of capabilities. You know, a capability, just to define that, okay, since we all often hear that word too, it's like piano playing. I spent 10 years, there's this notion of 20,000 hours. I probably spent 20,000 hours on music. Once you have that in your fingers, it's hard to lose. You may not do it for a while, but it's always there. So capabilities require investment, and once you have them, it's not that easy to lose them. So innovation is capabilities that do what? In my view, they have to be about something. It has to be related to a purpose. You know, making money is fine, but that to me is the basic requirement. But what is that in turn for? You know, once you've made the money, what's the purpose? You know, great companies, to me, are very good at creating meaning and inspiring their people. And I have found also in working with countries that smart countries actually can tell you what the purpose of innovation in their country is. If you go to Chile and you say, what is the purpose of innovation? Government officials will say, we want to be known as the Sustainability Innovation Society. You go to Singapore, they say, it's clean tech, digital media, and life sciences. And we want to be known because of all of those investments as the well-being society. I'm just going to illustrate this. I'm going to take a risk with you right now for a moment. I'm going to play a piece I don't know very well. So that's pretty risky, right? Because I might embarrass myself in front of this very senior audience in this kind of cultural exchange book. That would not be a good thing, right? So I'm trying to make myself nervous. I'm not nervous. But here's the piece.
So some